Hello and welcome to the PRODcast service demo. I'll start out with a brief introduction of Ponderosa Advisors and who we are and what we do before jumping into the demo. Ponderosa Advisors is a boutique advisory firm for the energy and water sectors based in Denver, Colorado. We leverage state-of-the-art databases and analytical tools to develop specialized, cutting-edge advisory services and investment strategies. Ponderosa Energy is a part of Ponderosa Advisors specializing in crude oil, natural gas, and NGL analytics. Our clients include private equity and hedge funds, infrastructure and pipelines, E&P companies, think tanks and governments, and refiners. Our clients engage with us in a couple of different ways. With consulting services, retainer services, subscription services, and our subscription services include both a production forecast system, which we will demo today, as well as a subscription report. What makes Ponderosa unique? Ponderosa focuses on the integration of crude, NGLs, and natural gas. We work by, just as an aside, before I move forward, if all of the attendees could use their phones while we're going through the presentation. Thank you. In terms of what makes Ponderosa unique, we focus on the integration of crude, NGLs, and natural gas. We look at the delineation of the commodity streams based upon the GPM and the API crude quality. This allows us to have an integrated view of crude, NGLs, and natural gas, and allows us to understand the regional differentials for both crude oil and gas pricing, and how the sensitivities and basis implications will evolve over time. Our basin field tier level producer economics allow us to see break-evens for more than 300 plus breakouts of the country, and this allows us to have understand the relative economic advantages of specific producers, acreage positions, and understand the productivity and cost differences between areas. We also have refinery-specific crude and condensate modeling, which allows us to do linear optimization models for all of the refineries in North America based on the specific unit capacities and configurations of those refineries. We also link supply and demand through a comprehensive U.S. transportation network model, which includes all the current tariff and transportation rates, and allows us to do scenario-based infrastructure development projects. Clients engage with us in a couple of different ways that I mentioned before. From a consulting and advisory point of view, we work on assets, and we're very quick to get back to you with due diligence on a particular asset that you're working on, and it allows us to efficiently produce scenario analyses and investment decisions thanks to all of the different tools that we have in-house. In terms of subscriptions, our subscriptions are intended to provide directional views and understanding of price impacts on production and producers, both regionally and granularly. From the point of view of retainer agreements, we also work hands-on with our clients throughout the year. We pair that with our quarterly or semi-annual market outlook presentations and tailored analysis under defined scopes that we work on with our clients to set up. Our two subscription offerings, one of them is the Market Outlook Report, which is a 5-year forecast for crude, NGLs, and natural gas supply, demand, and prices. We work with regional production breakouts by commodity, and we also take into consideration hedging and producer economics, as well as a global macro analysis. That's much more of a PDF level report, and it helps our clients understand how the markets are behaving at any point in time. Our production forecasting service is a web-based interface that provides the ability to sensitize commodity prices to assess production response by basin, field, or within the producer and tier. That's going to be the actual model that I'm going to demo for you today. Ponderosa, why Ponderosa? What makes Ponderosa different from the other production forecasting services? We forecast everything at a well level, just like a Bentec or a Spring Rock would. We forecast by basin, but further we break that down into a basin, field, producer, and tier level. And we also have a guidance-based forecast option, which I'll walk through as well. We also forecast crude, NGLs, and natural gas simultaneously, whereas our competitors will silo the commodities and look at them separately. So with that, I'll move forward to the demo itself. Ponderosa's PRODcast service is a production forecasting service hosted online. Anybody with a login and a browser can log in and look at this as long as you're a customer. We have 4 different forecasts within the system. One of them is the long-term Ponderosa forecast. The long-term Ponderosa forecast covers what Ponderosa's view is of production given our demand expectations and price expectations moving forward. It's a static forecast just like you would get from any other consulting shop. However, we also have a long-term interactive forecast which allows you to sensitize our inputs. So if you want to look at production at different minimum acceptable rate of return requirements, at different drilling and completion cost levels, or to look at production given a different WTI and Henry Hub price, those are all available for you to sensitize, and we'll look at that in 1 second. The third forecast I'm going to mention is the short-term Ponderosa forecast. The short-term Ponderosa forecast looks at production at a basin producer tier level. It is a guidance-based forecast in that we take into consideration all of the 64 producers that we cover and what they've said in their most recent earnings calls in terms of the number of wells they say they're going to drill in a particular area, the CAPEX that they're going to spend in a particular area. We take all of that information, but we also use state well level data to build our own type curves for these producers so that moving forward when we apply those type curves to these producers, we're able to come up with our own view of what their guidance-based forecast is going to look like. The fourth forecast is a current rig pace forecast, which shows users how much production we would expect given the most recent rig count that we have in the country. I'll start with the long-term interactive forecast. This forecast covers production at a basin field tier level. It allows you to see any of the commodities that you want to look at, whether it be oil, gross gas, or dry gas production, as well as NGLs. It allows you to pick a particular minimum acceptable rate of return, whether it be 0 to 30% in 2.5% intervals. You can choose those. It also allows you to pick your well cost adjustments. So normal well costs show well costs as they were reported on the most recent producer reporting from the point of view of either 10Ks or Qs or investor presentations. You have the ability to sensitize those costs down or move those up moving forward. You also have the 2 most important inputs, which are your natural gas price, so your Henry Hub price, as well as your crude oil price, your WTI price. We do work everything back from the basin level back to a WTI and a Henry Hub price, given what the most recent differentials were for that basin. We're able to make sure that we're looking at WTI and Henry Hub price so that we're comparing apples to apples when we do this sort of forecasting. What this is showing us at the moment is that at $2 and $49 crude oil prices, production in the United States would be pretty flat to declining in the future when we run out of some drillable locations and sweet spots. We can sensitize this to show any sort of production level. If I was to move this up to $65 and $3, once we let it process, what this will show us is the production that would be possible from all of the different basins that we cover at different crude oil and natural gas prices. We're currently looking just at crude oil production, And I'm going to show you in a second how we can dive further into one of these basins. But at the same time, with loads, I'll briefly comment on the chart at the right bottom corner. That allows the user to see production by API gravity range. So we do actually scrape all tax records to understand what the crude oil quality of every single well is within the country, so that we have an understanding of what the production is going to look like moving forward from a particular well as new wells that will be drilled within a particular area. As this loads, I'll just quickly remind everybody that's joined that if you could mute your call for the time being, that'd be great. Thank you. Now, what we've updated the production forecast to show is how much crude oil production would be possible at $3 per MMBtu Henry Hub and $65 per barrel crude oil prices. You can now see how everything breaks out by basin in terms of production. But if we want to dive further into a particular area, I'll click on the Eagle Ford, for example. You can see how much production is coming from the different fields within the Eagle Ford. You can see, for example, this big wedge here is the Eagleville field. If I click on the DeWitt area, I have more detail as to the crude oil quality from the DeWitt field. You can see that the DeWitt field is going to continue to grow production at the particular prices that we picked, and it would peak at about 600,000 barrels a day of production before starting to decline. That's a function of the fact that we would run out of drillable locations within this particular area. We calculate the number of drillable locations by calculating how much de-risked acreage there is. De-risked meaning there is a particular well on that acreage that's producing, and calculate the given spacing in that particular area, and using the combination of the two, come up with a drillable locations constraint. The other way to use this particular tool is to, instead of grouping by basin, you can actually group the production by oil break-even as well. So you can see now that I've changed the top graph to show how much production is possible at different $5 increments for WTI. You can see that there are some very important price thresholds, like the $35 to $40 threshold that brings a lot of production into the money, as well as the $45 to $50 price threshold. $45 to $50 price threshold makes the difference between declining production in the United States and growing production in the United States. You can further have the ability to dive into a particular area and understand how much where that production is coming from at that particular price point. So in this particular case, production, the $45 to $50 price band is coming from the Eagleville and the Eagle Ford, parts of the Midland Basin, and the Nesson field in the Williston. Users can use this particular interface to understand how much production is possible from different basins at different price levels. So if you were to be evaluating a prospect in the Williston Basin, you could search for the Williston and understand how much production is possible from the Williston Basin given different price levels. So at $60, you can see that production in the Williston would stay relatively flat to where we are today before declining in the years past the 2022 timeframe due to the lack of drillable locations moving forward. If we were to increase this price, you could see how much possible production there is from the basin and what peaks we could reach. And I'll let that process for a second. You can see that the Williston Basin and all of its detail is available for you to export into an Excel spreadsheet from the charts on the right. When they update, you have the ability to export them to Excel. Anything that we're looking at the moment is also back here in the raw data tab, so you can export all of the production by month, by field, by API gravity range, and pull it into an Excel file or a PowerPoint file so that you can use it in your everyday work, whether it be putting it into your own databases or into your own production systems. The tool also allows you to look at other commodities, and I will point out that there are other commodities that we can look at in different price combinations. And that's important because at Ponderosa we focus on the integration of all three commodities and how the one affects the production of another. This particular moment we're up to that $100 plus level, and you can see that there is a lot of additional production that comes into the money above the $70 per barrel mark for the Williston. Now, taking the filter off of the Williston and just focusing on the U.S. altogether, you can see how much production would be possible from the U.S. at $100 per barrel mark and above. But the most important thing to note is this is a good tool to understand what price thresholds are important for additional production to come on in the United States. And it also allows you to see where that would come from. We can also focus on gross gas production and look at how much gas production is available from the U.S. at $3 per MMBtu and $100 per barrel WTI. What this particular view shows us is that there is, of course, production of gas that would come from drier basins, so there wouldn't be much in the way of crude oil prices affecting the economics. But moving up the chain, there are associated gas production levels that come with different crude oil prices. So areas in the Eagle Ford, for example, like the Gates Ranch or the Hawkville, when those come into the money due to the combination of the crude oil and gas price, our system would capture that and show those volumes as coming on, although some other forecasting services would silo those commodities so they wouldn't be able to understand how the oil and gas price affect the production from a particular basin. Moving to an NGL production view, what you can see is that there is a couple different cases that we cover. One of them is the normal NGL production case. The normal NGL production case allows you to see if we continue to recover NGLs at the same rate that we're recovering them at, so we have the same GPM and barrel composition for all of these products, how much additional production would be available of these different products at these different price levels. We have another case that allows us to see if we didn't reject ethane, how much NGLs would we really recover? So the ethane rejection scenario allows us to see how much ethane is being rejected at the moment, and if moving forward we wanted to recover more ethane, how much would possibly be available. Also, we have a case that covers what would happen if we didn't flare any volumes. So that's, of course, more important for particular basins like the Williston, where there's still significant flared volumes. And also we have a final case to say how much NGLs could be recovered if we were to actually renew the old refrigeration style processing plant units to cryogenic units. Cryogenic units would recover more ethane and propane, so how much additional volume is there? So really this service allows you to see if the price was right, if we could recover all of these different NGL products, how much would we really recover? Moving to a field level break-even tab, this tab allows you to pick a particular area, for example, Denver-Julesburg Basin, pick a particular field like Wattenberg, and a tier within that particular field, and understand what the type curves look like for both oil and gas production. I'm just going to remind attendees one more time that if you guys could mute your phones, it'd be useful. Thank you. The Wattenberg field and tier, now what we're looking at is oil production and gas production for the particular tier that we're looking at in the Wattenberg. It allows us to move prices around to understand what the IRR looks like. So if we move prices somewhere they're near today, so 47.75 and 250 are the two levels that I settled on, and we give it 1 second to process, you'll see that it will give us an IRR of 23.4% in Tier 1 of the Wattenberg Basin. The other things that you can see here is that to get a 20% rate of return at a $2.50 gas price, you would need a $45.50 WTI oil price to make this basin work. It also lists the well costs in the area. If we were to move from a Tier 1 production to a Tier 2 production in the Wattenberg Basin, what you'll see is that the IRR changes dramatically from the 23% that we were at down to a 6.5% IRR level. And to get that 20% rate of return, you would need a $65 oil price to make this area work. It also allows you to see the breakout of the revenue. So you can see that 70% of the revenue comes from oil, whereas only 19% of the revenue comes from gas. 11% is from NGLs for Tier 2 Wattenberg production. We divide the country up into tiers by looking at the IP rates, and we divide all of the wells drilled within the last 2 years into 3 even buckets to build our type curves and understand how production would act given the economics that those type curves imply. With the well cost assumptions, lease operating expenses, and basis differentials all worked in there. All of our pricing and our calculations are after federal income tax calculations. Again, as I mentioned, all of the raw data is in the back, and any raw data that you see in tables is available for you to export to a CSV if you wanted to. I'm going to move back out from the long-term interactive forecast and move to a short-term Ponderosa forecast. This forecast covers production at a basin producer tier level. We believe that this is the best way to forecast production in the short term. Although economics do prevail in the longer term forecasting, in the short term, companies do have other things that they have to consider, like the leases that they have to keep, or other obligations that require them to keep drilling within a particular area. Taking those into consideration and what producers say they're going to drill, we can come up with a guidance-based forecast that allows us to take the number of wells they say they're going to drill and the CAPEX that they're going to spend in a basin and merge that with our understanding of the type curves in the area from well-level data. We can come up with our own volume guidance for different producers within these different areas. This methodology is helpful. For example, at the beginning of last year, when Pioneer had come out and said that there was no way that they could grow production in the third and fourth quarters of 2015, but they put out a drilling forecast along with it, we were able to use our type curves and the drilling forecast that they put out to understand that they were not going to decline in the third and fourth quarters, and likely that was more posturing on their end to be able to lock down the 20 to 30% drilling and completion cost and service cost reduction that they were seeing. We saw that across a couple of different producers. So this methodology has helped us stay ahead of some producer behavior and helped us stay accurate in terms of forecasted volumes. What this allows us to do, again, is to look at either oil or gas production, but we can always focus on a particular area. So in this particular case, I'll filter it down to the Permian Basin. In the Permian Basin, what this is showing us is our expectations of Permian Basin production. The Permian Basin, we do expect to continue to grow this year. We have seen rigs move into the area and out of the Eagle Ford, for example, but a lot of that is due to producers trying to keep leases. The Permian is one of the most interesting areas in that they have had some of the most innovative leasing techniques out there. The landowners are savvy, and they've negotiated 3-year leases and continued drilling agreements along with them. So if a producer wants to keep access to the stacked pay zones that are underneath their lease, they need to continue to drill into those particular pay zones as well to keep that right. That is previously not something that has happened in areas like the Eagle Ford, where there's really only one particular formation that people are targeting. So we do see continued production in the area. You can also see down below here on the left-hand graph at the bottom that production is broken out by producer, and the producers that we cover make up about 85 to 90% of the whole production from the Permian Basin. The rest of the production we cover as a projected volume moving forward. You can dive further into a particular company and understand how, for example, Cimarex's production will act throughout 2016, given the plans that they have disclosed and the volumes that we have for them from every particular well and well type group. Again, all of the information is exportable to a table. A couple other things I'll show here is, for example, if we look at gross gas production and we look at Antero's volumes for gross gas production. Antero is one of the 64 different producers that we cover. You can see how the production breaks out between the Marcellus and the Utica for them. And you can also see a couple different bumps throughout the year. This is us taking into consideration information that Antero has given us that they will have 100 wells that they drilled last year, 50 of them were put into inventory, and they're going to bring those 50 wells online at the middle of the year to in preparation for the pipeline capacity that they have out of the area. We also have the bump at the end of the year corresponding to the second infrastructure build out that will come up towards the end of the year in the Marcellus Utica region. So all of those considerations from the point of view of how many wells are they drilling, how many are they putting into inventory, how many of them they expect to bring on in future years or time frames, we take that into consideration when building out our forecast. We also have the same view at a producer level. So we can actually look at a producer like Anadarko in the Denver-Julesburg Basin and look at their Tier 1 production. And we'll disclose what the type curve that we have for oil and gas is for that particular producer. And we can also see that they have a very, very good economic acreage at $45 and $2.15 Henry Hub in their Tier 1 sort of acreage. Moving into the Tier 2 level acreage, their IRR is going to be significantly lower here at the 30% IRR range, with their Tier 3 coming in below that at, let it process for a second, 15%. So Anadarko's Denver-Julesburg acreage, even at very, very low prices like $45 and $2.15 Henry Hub, is very economic. It's very much due to very low well costs in the area, and also their advantageous position in that they have fewer tax regulations that are haunting them, and royalty regulations because of the land that they own. We can also look at a basin by basin comparison to understand how producers within a basin stack up against each other in terms of acreage. So if we look at the Eagle Ford and look at Tier 1 production, some of the most economic Tier 1 production has in Canna, Devon, SM, and EOG own some of that acreage, and you can see that Murphy has some great acreage in the area as well. So looking at this, it seems like all of these producers have great economics in this area. However, one thing to notice here is that Murphy, although they have a great Tier 1 break-even price, Tier 3 and Tier 2 require much higher prices, whereas a company like EOG has the ability to make 20% return at prices below $50 in their whole acreage position across the Eagle Ford. We also have the ability to look at a particular producer's portfolio. So when looking at Anadarko, the company, you can see that Denver, Julesburg, and Permian acreage is their most economic acreage, and that's why Anadarko has been focusing on the DJ and the Permian rather than focusing on the Appalachian, Pennsylvania North stuff. They're not drilling there, or in the Powder River. And this graph helps you to see how that plays out. So a couple questions that have come in through the chat. We had a question regarding how do we define the tiers for how do we define 1, 2, and 3 tier acreage. We look at all the production within the last 2 years, all the wells drilled within the last 2 years. We break that up into 3 equal buckets by IP rate. That allows us to have a breakout that that corresponds both economically to the top producing wells, but also it allows us to, across the 3 tiers, have about equal acreage opportunity for all of the producers. So it is determined by IP rate. So that was the short-term Ponderosa forecast that we just walked through. I'm going to move into looking at a map view. Yes, and just one more question that's come in about how do we define the IP rate cutoffs. They're defined either by the basin and field level that we're looking at in the long-term forecast, or at the producer level we break it up into the producer's acreage itself. So it's producer specific and field specific. We're not breaking the basin up into a predefined three cuts. It's field and producer specific tiers. Moving into a map view, I'm going to show you here a couple of different tabs that that have a couple different things that we're showing here. One of them is a map of all of the crude oil producing wells in the country by crude oil gravity. So it allows you to see throughout the country where is the light production coming from, where's the heavy production coming from, which producers' wells are producing that lighter quality crude oil, and which ones are the heavier crude oil sort of basins and areas. So once this loads, you can see all of the oil producing wells in the country. If I dive into an area like the Eagle Ford and Permian, what you can see is that the heavier production comes from the oily window of the Eagle Ford. It's that 25 to 35 degree API gravity stuff in the northern part of the Eagleville Basin, Eagleville Field, I'm sorry. And then moving southwest, as you get deeper and wetter, you get the more and more lighter crude oils in that 35 to 42, and then further into the 42 to 50 plus degree API quality production. Additionally, everybody talks about the Permian Basin and how much lighter the production is getting in that area. You can see where that lighter production is. It's from the northern part of the Delaware Basin near the New Mexico border on the Texas side, and also the southern part of the Midland Basin that's producing a lot more lighter hydrocarbons. We can also start to look at different companies and understand what their crude oil quality looks like. So looking at EOG's production, EOG has a lot of 35 to 42 degree API benchmark production in the area versus a Chesapeake who has a lot more of the lighter 42 to 50 degree API production on the southwestern part of the basin. There's also an active rig map that allows you to see how many active rigs there are in the country by either orientation, so whether it's directional, or vertical, or horizontal, or what sort of commodity it's drilling for, whether it's oil, gas, or anything else. And we also can see by week how many rigs were active in the area. So we have history back to 2014. Going back, you can see there was 1,765 rigs active at the beginning of 2014, and today we now have 446. You can break them down by basin, by field, and also by the operator of the rig. We also have a map that allows you to see all of the permits that have been filed in the country since late 2013 that still have not been drilled into. So this will help you understand where recently there have been permits to drill filed, and where you can expect to see activity at a producer level moving forward, given their permitting activity. We also have a drilled and uncompleted wells map. So this has been something that the people have asked us about quite a bit. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time with this map and the methodology behind it. The methodology behind this map is to look at all of the wells drilled in the country and when they were when the rig was released from that particular site, and look at the production data to see whether or not that drilled well has showed up in the production data. So there are some weaknesses to that methodology, in that for an area like West Virginia or Oklahoma, where reporting of production volumes is weak, and West Virginia, for example, has not reported any production for 2015 yet, and Oklahoma production has lagged back to April of last year. Sometimes some of the wells that may have been completed in the meanwhile still show up in this data set. However, areas like Texas, Colorado, North Dakota, Wyoming, these areas are very, very good at reporting production on a timely basis, with a lag, but at least on a timely basis. So this allows us to see how many are drilled and uncompleted by different producers within those basins very clearly. So we tend to think of drilled and uncompleted wells as those wells that have been drilled but not completed for more than 6 months, because in that 3 to 6 month time frame, it could be the regular spud to completion lag for many of these wells. So if we were to look at an operator like EOG again, we could see where EOG has drilled uncompleted wells. We can dive in and see how many of them are in the Eagle Ford. For example, of the 359 drilled uncompleted wells that EOG has, 114 of those lie in the Eagle Ford Basin. We also have a map that lists the tiers by producer. So this is, and just to answer the question about DUCs that just came through, as long as a well has been drilled, we count that as a drilled well. So the completion can come later. So our only criteria is that the well has been spud and that the rig has left the particular area in which it was drilling. A tier map allows us to see by producer where Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 drilling has occurred across time. So this will help you to dive in and understand where a particular producer's best wells lie within a basin. So if we were to look at Anadarko's wells in the Wattenberg Basin and sort of dive in, what you'll see is that a lot of the Tier 1, Tier 2 wells lie in close proximity to each other, whereas some of the Tier 3 stuff are a little more on the outsides of their acreage. So one more question that came up about DUCs, with whether or not they've been cased and what that means for the longevity of it being kept as a DUC. We don't count anything past a certain period of time. If it hasn't been completed for more than 2 years, we assume that is not a drilled uncompleted well. That's more of an abandoned well. So if any of those uncased wells were to fall into a category of having been compromised by the amount of time that they were uncased or anything to do with the casing that kept them out of the economic completion cycle in the future, we would cover that. Those are the different tabs within the forecast file that are of interest. I'll also show you the long-term Ponderosa forecast and quickly talk about what Ponderosa believes production is likely to do in the next couple of years according to our price forecast. So we expect oil production to continue to decline through 2016 and into 2017. We believe that in 2018, that's the year that will likely rebound back to a stable $60 per barrel WTI environment, and at that point we can continue to grow production moving forward. From a gas production point of view, we expect that gas production will continue to grow into the future, and we expect that prices will likely have to rebound quite to a $4 level, definitely in the winter, if winter shows up, because we have been declining a lot of production due to the fact that associated gas has been declining across all of these different basins. So we will likely need to encourage dry gas directed drilling, and that can be at price levels between $3.50 and $4. So if winter shows up and we need that gas, expect to see higher prices in the winter time. We expect longer-term equilibrium prices $3.50 to $4 range in the long run. So a couple more questions that have come in. We have one question asking about how we calculate the crude oil quality and natural gas differentials by region, by basin and field. We look at all of the crude quality in the basin, as I talked earlier, by looking at the tax records to understand what the quality of the crude oil production is from that particular well. We take that and we put, we have a list of assays within our library and a refinery modeling system that allows us to understand how much a particular crude oil is worth in a refinery given different product prices. So we use that to understand what the crude quality differential is by region, by basin and field. And that allows us to understand the crude quality differential. The transportation differential, we actually look at tariffs for both crude oil and natural gas, and understand what the cost of getting you to market is from the particular area that you're at. And we use the most recent natural gas basis differentials by region. So moving forward, we don't assume that the basis differential gets better for an area like northern Pennsylvania, where there's not new pipes being built, or in anywhere in the Northeast in particular. However, we are working on an alpha product that allows the user to actually put in their own differential assumptions. And also with that alpha product, we're going to also roll out the functionality for the user to be able to integrate the forward curve to into their production calculations instead of using a flat price level for oil and gas. The other question that we have here is, how does Ponderosa determine type curve assumptions for areas with limited drilling history? When we have limited drilling history in an area, as in we don't have enough wells to justify building a type curve from, we'll usually lengthen out the 2-year period that we usually look at to cover more wells, and that's how we make sure that we have a large enough sample to get a good type curve built. So with that, that's a overview of the Ponderosa Energy PRODcast system. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact Ponderosa. And if you have any questions about pricing, feel free to reach out to Stephanie Broughton or Harry Brookby to get more information about how you can sign up for the service and the costs. Thanks for attending, and look forward to any more questions. Thank you.